Good morning. So today we're going to talk about properties. You should have two sheets with you. This is a note sheet, and then it's going to have some questions on the back. And the other sheet you should have is this sheet of paper that's blank on the left side, has the properties listed on the right side, and then has some information about them on the inside. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make our foldable. So if you would just fold this side over to the right, and that way you have this folded piece of paper, and on the left side you have these words. Sorry, I'll put it over here for you. So the left side you have these words, and on the right side you have the numbers. So what we're going to do now is take our scissors, and we're just going to cut. You can see faintly where these lines are. You're just going to cut to there. Make sure, like all foldables we do, that you don't cut this back part. So this back part stays whole. Then you're also going to cut, and you're going to keep cutting, and feel free to pause the video if I'm going too fast for you, or rewind. Okay, so now you should have your foldable right here for you. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to do the commutative property. Okay, so for the commutative property, here it states that the commutative property is where the order in which you add or multiply does not matter. Let me zoom in so you can see that. Okay, so the commutative property and CO, commutative property, is the order in which you add or multiply. Note, subtraction and division are not the same. Okay, so here it's 2 and then 4, and here it's 4 and then 2. 5 times 6 is the same thing as 6 times 5. So on your foldable here, for commutative property, I want you to box the letter CO, and then I'd like for you to write under that that means to change order. So CO equals change order. Okay? And so on the inside, that's exactly what it says on the inside. Let me zoom back out for you. Alright? So, if this is 3 plus 2, then it has to be 2 plus 3. If this is 5 times 7, it would have to be 7 times 5. 17 plus 8 plus 3, well, since the 17 stays the same and you have to change the order, then we're just going to change the 8 and the 3. So since the 8 came first, it's going to go last, and since the 3 came last, it'll go first. And then the same thing here. Notice this 5 stayed the same, so this is going to become a 2, and then this one will become the 18. And so again, maybe make a little note up here that it does not work for subtraction and division. Okay. Alright, so the next one we're going to do is the associative property. And associative properties work for addition and multiplication, but it's working on what the grouping of it is. And I kind of talk about this, and that's when the parentheses change. Okay? So here, remember, the numbers stay the same. 2, 4, 7, 2, 4, 7. So it's not commutative because the numbers aren't changing, but the parentheses are. Here that was around the 4 and the 7. Here it's around the 2 and the 4. So it's really about these parentheses. So I'm going to highlight the parentheses. Here they're around the 6 and the 2. Here they're around the 4 and the 6. Okay? So associative property. On your foldable, I want you to box in the words ASSO, and I want you to write that means always stay the same order, meaning that the numbers themselves never change, but the parentheses do. So then when you open it up, you associate with different groups. So you can think about parentheses like hugs for your friends, okay? So parentheses. And you can think about this as different hugs for friends for your groups, which are your friends. Okay? So, in this one, it's going to be, remember, the numbers have to stay the same order. So if it's 6, 4, 8, it's going to be 6, 4, 8. But notice my parentheses here changed. Here, 5, 4, 5, 9, so it's going to be 4, 5, 9. And then here, 4, 2, negative 2, 4, 2, negative 2. But on the highlighter, I'm going to note that here's where the parentheses are changing. But the blue is the important part. Okay. So the next thing we're going to go over is the identity property for addition and multiplication. So we're going to jump down to 4 and 5 on your worksheet. So identity is when a number stays the same. So identity, I want you on your foldable to say stays the same. Okay? And that can happen with multiplication or addition, but there's different rules for addition and there's different rules for multiplication. Okay. So for addition, for additive identity, which means add, when a 0 is added to any number, the sum is the number. Meaning, A plus 0 equals A. So 0 is the additive identity. Okay? So on your foldable here, add 0 to keep the number's identity. And we call this the additive identity element. Okay? Alright? And so that's when you're going to add. Alright? So then over here, when you multiply, your multiplicative identity, when you multiply, is when any number or variable is multiplied by 1, the product is the number. So for instance, if you were to take A times 1, you'd still get A. Notice, here's the same letter, but when we're adding, we add 0, and when let me zoom in for you. When we're adding, we add 0, and when we multiply by 1. So over here, we added 0, and we still got 2. Here we multiplied by 1, and we still got 5. So on your foldable, I want you to note that you're multiplying and then box in 1, and 1 is called the multiplicative, I know, it's kind of crazy word, multiplicative identity element. Okay? Alright, so then we can do the examples. So when we're adding by 0, we still get the same number. 975 is still 975. What can we add to 0 to get negative 7? Well, it's going to be negative 7. Okay, this together, negative 3 plus 3 gives you 0. So 5 plus 0 is still 5. Negative 28 times something gives you negative 28. So that would be 1 because we're multiplying. And then something times 1 gives you 3.75. So it would have to be 3.75. Okay? Okay, so the next one we're going to do is the inverse properties, which are number 7 and number 8 on your sheet. And the inverse property states that when you add, additive inverse, so when you add any number and its opposite, the sum is 0. So example, a plus negative a equals 0. 10 plus negative 10 is 0. 5 plus positive 5 is, or negative 5 plus positive 5 is 0. Okay? And then when you multiply, the multiplicative inverse, which means multiply, when any number and its reciprocal are multiplied together, the product is 1. So for instance, a is the same thing as a over 1. So if we multiply that should say a multiply sign on your sheet, I'm sorry. If it's a over 1 and you multiply that by 1 over a, the answer you get is 1. If you do 8, that's the same thing as 8 over 1 times 1/8, you'll get 1. And then 3/4 times 4 over 3, you'll get 1. So on your foldable here, I want to make sure that you've written that when you add a number, so that when you're doing the addition, you add the opposite, and your answer should be 0, or you multiply a reciprocal, and the answer is 1. And that kind of goes with the identity property we were going about, right? Remember, the additive identity element is 0, and the multiplicative identity element is 1. So it makes sense that when you're doing the additive inverse, if you add the opposite, you'll get 0, and when you multiply by the reciprocal, you'd get 1. Okay? So let's do some examples. Now remember, when I'm adding, I have to add the opposite. So the opposite of 3 is negative 3, and I'll get 0. The opposite of negative 7.5 is positive 7.5, and I'll get 0. Here we did 2 over 1 times 1 over 2 is equal to 1. That's the multiplicative identity, or the multiplicative inverse, sorry. And then 3/4, the reciprocal of 3/4 is 4/3, so 3/4 times 4/3 is 1. And notice, for the addition one, we were getting 0 as our answer, and for the multiplicative one, we were getting 1 as our answer. Okay. And so I guess on the front of your foldable, I want you to box in the word inverse. And so then for addition, addition means opposite. Whoops. And multiplication means reciprocal. Okay. So next one we're going to do is the distributive property, and that's number 3 on your sheet. So the distributive property says, and this might make you guys laugh, but distribute is like pass out papers, right? I tell you to distribute one. Or if I'm going to give all the children in my class a piece of candy from my candy bowl, I take the candy from my bowl and I give it to my other students. So in class I call this the cheater property, okay? So here's the guy, and he's going to go on a date with letter B, and then he goes home sick, and later in the night he goes out with girl C. And so he's got, here we have, now we have A and B on a date, and then we have later in the night A and C on a date. Okay? And that's the same thing here. So if A went on a date with B, then A goes on a date with C, So we've got AB in the first part of the night and AC in the second part of the night. Notice the addition sign here just transfers in between the two, and the subtraction sign does the same thing. So here's some examples. 3 goes on a date with 7, and then on a date with 2, so 3 times 7 is the same thing as 3 times 2. And then if you do 3 times 7, you get 21, and then 3 times 2 is 6, and if you add them together, your answer is 27. Here, 5 goes on a date with 9, and then 5 goes on a date with 6. So 5 times 9 is 45, 5 times 6 is 30, 45 minus 30 gives you 15. So on your distributive property, you can box and distribute. I guess you can distribute, and distribute. And you can put or to pass out candy. And then you can write over here the cheater property. Sorry, I still messed that up a little bit. Okay. So inside, distribute means to give out. So just like candy, to give out. So distribute, give out. Okay. So 4 goes out with 20. So this is going to be 4 times 20. And then 4 goes out with 3. 4 times 3. 6 goes out with 30. So notice 30 is already there, so this is going to be 6 times 30. And then 6 goes out with 1, so it's going to be 6 times 1. Now this is cool. The answer is 8 times 99 cents. So this is 8 times $1 minus 8 times 1 cent to get 99 cents. Okay? And the last property we're going to talk about is the multiplicative property of 0. So you're multiplying multiplicative property of 0 with the number 0. On your foldable it says 0 product property. Same thing, 0 meaning 0. Product meaning that you are multiplying. Okay, so on number 6 on your sheet here, it says that when any number or variable is multiplied by 0, so multiplied by 0, the product or the answer is 0. Okay, so down here an example is, since we here are multiplying by 0, the answer that we get is 0. So 8 times 0 is 0, or you could say 3 times 0 is going to give you 0. The only thing that's tricky is a lot of students get this property mixed up with the additive inverse property, because you can see they both end in 0. So the multiplicative property of 0, it's not that it ends in 0, it's that it's being multiplied by 0. So make sure that you don't get these two properties mixed up. So on your foldable here, you can open it up, and 0 product means 0 times a number. So again, that's the key part, that you're doing 0 times n. Okay? Alright, so for instance, here we are multiplying by 0, so 21 times 0 is 21. Here we're getting 0, and we have to use the 0 product property. So negative 8 times what will give me 0? Well, times 0 gives you 0. Now here, negative 4 plus 4 gives you 0. So you're multiplying by 0, so your end product is going to be 0. See how this part here, this part here is timesing by 0. And the last thing is, here we have all these numbers that are really large numbers, but it doesn't matter. If we're multiplying by 0, the answer is still going to be 0. Okay? So for your homework tonight, you need to bring this foldable into me tomorrow to get a check, and then I'd like for you to complete numbers 1 through 16 on the back side. It's just matching, so you can write the letter that matches up to it on the back side.